Hello, in this broadcast, the news from Ostankino. Circumstances which have developed around the Russian armed forces recently were of special attention at the Moscow conference today. Attending the conference of the Command Staff of Armed Forces were the President of Russia, the Prime Minister, and the First Vice Premier. The Minister of Defense at today's conference of the Commanding Staff of the Military Department stated that the armed forces of Russia are capable of providing national security for the country. Involved in the conference were Victor Chernomyrdin, members of government, heads of the armed forces and financial ministries of Russia, and the President of Russia, Boris Yeltsin. According to the Minister of Defense, Pavel Grachov, the results of inspecting the military preparedness of units of the Russian Army and Fleet in 1994 speak of the growth and military readiness of the country's forces. The strategic forces, said the Minister of Defense, remain the main guarantor of security and restraint for a potential aggressor. Speaking at the conference, the Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces, the President of Russia, Boris Yeltsin, analyzed the progress of reforms in the Russian army, expressed several critical observations, and formulated the aims in increasing military preparedness of Russia's armed forces for 1995. He also noted the special need to increase preparedness in more focused ways and with greater effectiveness, especially in the conditions of intense decrease of the army. And also he stated, we mustn't forget that still we have political, economic, territorial, and national, and ethnic and religious contradictions, and the production of new forms of weapons does not cease. And all of this, marked the President, secretly contains a potential threat for Russia, and it's necessary for Russian armed forces to be ready for various turns in the paths of world processes. Special attention in the beginning of his speech, the President of Russia devoted to the failure of the Democrats at the elections in the United States and the Congress now having a Republican Senate, as a result of which one may expect a certain embitterment between the United States and Russia in the military sphere. Overall, the speech of the President at the conference speaks of the fact that he is in detail acquainted with the current conditions of our army. The series of measures which he as Commander-in-Chief instructed the Minister of Defense to undertake in the near future indicate that the strengthening of the army in 1995 will be a priority in the work of the President and the government. Meanwhile, the State Duma Committee on the Defense Thursday will discuss the question of confidence in Pavel Grachov. This was told in an interview to Interfox by the chairman of the Parliamentary Committee on Defense, Sergei Yushchenkov. One more motive inspiring the committee to examine the question about confidence in Pavel Grachov was the incident which occurred today when the deputy chairman of the Parliamentary Committee on Defense, Alexander Piskunov, was not permitted to attend the session of the leading officials of the armed forces. The heads of the three economic committees of the State Duma demand to hear the report of the government on the results of voucher privatization. And according to our information, the President of Russia intends to meet with heads of the administrations of the Far Eastern territories. The latter are hopeful of the examination and signing of a draft presidential decree on the Far East. In this draft, a complex of measures is proposed without which it's impossible to restore the region's economy and for each of its territories to survive. And the situation there is extremely difficult. This is how the southern regions of Primoria looked immediately after the destructive September flooding. Now the water has receded, but the destruction remains. For liquidation of the repercussions on the conclusion of the Commission of the Ministry of Emergency Situations of Russia, 749 billion rubles are needed, and the government, however, has allotted only 46. These funds were instantaneously spent to conduct immediate repairs of the energy systems, roads, and to establish deliveries across the rivers, to restore water dikes of Nakhodka and Partizansk. And only a small portion of those funds reached the people now homeless because of the disaster, who on the eve of winter lost literally everything. And how did the government help you? Not with a kopeck, nor did I see anything. To realistically expect this year that any serious funds from Moscow would arrive to liquidate the repercussions of the disaster in Primoria is not realistic, and people have as recourse to follow the admonition of the administration of Nakhodka, let's help ourselves. Where did the money go, which was promised to people who suffered from the storm, is not quite clear to date. I'll remind you of a report we received from our reporter on the Kuril Islands. The ministry didn't like the fact that sources of mass media reported about its serious mistakes in the purchase and delivery of homes of the container trailer type for victims of the disaster. Tens of billions of rubles were spent on the operation, but the Kuril residents still prefer to remain in their tents and their own garages, and outside temperatures are below zero. The State Commission on Liquidating Consequences of the Earthquake in the Sakhalin district reported today that it is fully in control of money being spent and and allotted from the federal budget to aid the victims. They spoke about money and not about the quality of the temporary homes purchased. Regarding the houses, the opinion of the head of the Ministry on Emergency Situations, although undisputable, but is monosemantic. It's such a lie that with money, it's a little bit more complicated. It appears a scandal is brewing. The Ministry of Emergency Situations today asserted that it was only a conveyance mechanism. All monies allocated to liquidate the repercussions of the earthquake, compensation for Kuril residents, have long ago been deposited in Sakhalin banks. The fact that there, on the 21st of October, they had received 80 billion in compensation for victims, I was personally told by local bankers. However, the problem is that of 22,000 residents of Kuril, even according to official reports, compensation went only to 400. Thousands abandoned the island without anything in their pockets. People on the Kuril Islands continued to live a pitiful existence without money, without a chance to travel to Bolshaya Zemlya. Where's this money, and why doesn't that money reach the people? Today, the State Commission instructed the administration of the Sakhalin district to immediately find out and file a report for expenditures of the money, and demanded that the local administration finally resolve the question of delivery of food to the Kuril Islands, which on the emergency basis was transported to the South Sakhalin area back in October. On how successfully our Far Eastern and Primorye region develops, to a certain degree, affects the authority of Russia as well. For now, the Russian representatives will not participate tomorrow in Indonesia in the opening of the largest Asian Pacific Forum, which will discuss the economic future of the region in the 21st century. The July visit of the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Russia, Andrei Kozyrev, to the capital of Thailand, Bangkok, where the conference of the heads of foreign affairs departments of the country members of the Asian region was held, finally inspired certain optimism that Russia, as a great Eurasian power, would occupy a worthy place in this broad region, especially since the entrance into the market of the Southeast Asian region is already open. Malaysia, for example, is prepared to re-equip its military air force with Russian MiG-29s. For now, this is the first breakthrough. To become serious and respected partners is not so easy, although Russia no longer intends to impress anyone with the grandioseness of its principles and behave itself, as Andrei Kozyrev said, as a bull in a china shop. Yet, at the opening tomorrow in Indonesia of the largest Asian Pacific Forum, not invited were either the Russian president nor the Minister of Foreign Affairs. The reason for this is that Russia is not a member of the Organization of the Asian Pacific Economic Cooperation, which embraces 18 countries on the territory, and for now, Russia cannot enter because of a 3-year moratorium on expanding its ranks. Possibly the question of Russia's membership, having the most direct relationship with Asia and the Pacific Basin, will be resolved. Of this opinion are many member countries of APEC as well, although there are other positions and evidently not without foundation. What is occurring in the regions of our Far East and Primorye can't inspire serious partnership. Isolated from the internal Russian market and having lost hope for aid from the center, the Far East, in order to survive, is prepared to cooperate not only with countries of the Asian Pacific region, but even more distant partners, for example, the United States and Australia, who, unlike our own Russia, offer goods at a significantly cheaper price. If in neighboring countries of the region artificial restrictions are lifted which had impeded trade, our barriers, and not only customs barriers, are now impossible to overcome. Since the beginning of the year, the Far East was abandoned by around 100,000 desperate Russians, and in the cities of the Golden Kalama, the good in most shortage is the container for transport. And so Russian politicians must be concerned not so much about Russian participation in the Asian Pacific Forum, but the most serious drama in the Far East and Primorye, which just recently was viewed as a plot storm to enter Big Asia. And again about internal problems. News during the day from the Arkhangelsk district. Winter is viewed there as disastrous. In connection with this, the Arkhangelsk district will not make tax payments into the budget in order to find money for fuel. This was reported by our correspondent. In order not to freeze housing quarters, the administration has resorted to extremes. Companies will be fed electricity on an emergency schedule. In neighboring regions, the situation is no better. The government of the district has appealed to the president and the chairman of the Ministerial Council with a request to make specific allocations of fuel for northern cities. And about money, the rate of the ruble in trading at the Moscow exchange continues to decline. Compared to Friday, it fell by 10 rubles and comprises 3,118 rubles per dollar. The acting chairman of the central bank, Tatiana Paramonova, feels that at this time the current floating rate of the ruble is most expedient. She also told Interfox that she's doubtful whether it will be possible to cover the deficit of the state state budget next year by attracting government securities to the sum of 40 trillion rubles. Evidently, some money will be attempted to be retrieved through bettering tax collection. Specifically, the Ministry of Finances and the State Taxation Services have planned measures to control collection. The Minister of Finances, Panskov, marked that the planned measures focus on controlling cash turnover. From the CIS countries today, on the economic topic, there was very little news, but yet there is a report from Belarus. The President, Alexander Lukashenko, made arrangements to decrease prices on certain food products and provide material aid to needy citizens. At the same time, in Belarus, prices on oil products have been increased approximately by 21 to 25%. Gasoline has also appreciated. In Moscow, however, gasoline is still in shortage, although it was promised that the 12th of November this problem would be resolved. The Moscow oil refining plant during the last 24 hours has sent out 6,000 tons of gasoline with a demand of 8. And now, why it's difficult to catch a taxi in Moscow, despite the gas problem. The only conveyor belt assembling passenger vehicles in Russia which works in 3 shifts is at the Gorky automobile plant. Among vehicles which come off the passenger auto conveyor belt in percentage proportion, how many of these vehicles were taxi cabs? It was between 25 to 30, and today, not one. In 1991, privatization of taxi cabs in Moscow began. 15,000 Volgas were sold at discount prices to drivers, and so today these vehicles are approaching their obsolescence, and one can't call them taxis. There's no common fare. To order or get a cab is a problem, and those 20 stables, as in taxi driver jargon, cab parking lots are called, where there was a concentration of repair and diagnostic bases, for a long time have not been used for those purposes. The first attempt at privatization in Moscow was a disaster, but unfortunately this was repeated in other cities. The passenger has also changed. Today, using cabs are businessmen who, for whatever reason, find themselves without a vehicle, and they hire the automobile for the entire day. And if you're an ordinary passenger and at the terminal you decide to take a car, you immediately are embraced by the mafia, which has its own fare. From Kazansk railway terminal to the center, 50,000. And yet, the Gorky auto plant has developed a new model of a taxi cab with a bi-fuel system, natural gas and gasoline, expedient in the conditions of today's crisis. I'm just simply surprised by such a situation when the regional budget and the federal budget lose profit. So perhaps we should return to this problem, and the government should begin to collect taxes from those occupied with unlicensed taxi service in the cities, and we, as consumers, will receive normal transportation and at least some rights. For a long time, the symbol of grayness and poverty were our domestic institutions, with obligatory portraits of the leader or the head of the country on its walls. Today, the situation is fundamentally changing. Gaining force, the Russian commercial structures are devoting more and more attention to the design of their offices, justly surmising that this is the face of their firms. Greater attention is devoted to technical equipping of offices, first of all, bank offices. Today, at the opening in Moscow of the international exhibit, The Bank and Office, organized for the 4th time by the Joint Share Association Expo Center, jointly with the Association of Russian Banks, together with computing technologies, specialized furniture and other office equipment, demonstrates also systems of security measures and alarms, safes and locks. Unfortunately, currently, Russian industry can satisfy the demands for such a type of technology and equipment by only 25%. So it's not surprising that the models of goods displayed are of foreign production. However, it's joyful that Russian companies are adapting imported technologies to Russian conditions and create their own original computer networks and develop special programs for them. This attracts not only Russian consumers, but foreign ones as well. In the exhibit, there are more than 300 firms from 20 countries. We often criticize our healthcare system, yet, despite everything, medical personnel continue to work. Today, a report about unique operations performed in isolated cases for now, but scientists feel that tomorrow that will be accessible to many. More than 300 specialists from Russia and the CIS countries, participants of the International Seminar of Diagnostic and Surgical Endoscopy in the Center of Obstetrics and Gynecology and Prenatology in Moscow, followed the demonstrative surgery performed by leading French and American surgeons. The new technologies and special instruments make these operations kind and safe for patients, reduce treatment time, and serve as a preventative measure for possible complications. Now, on the monitor, we see details of the operation. It's truly amazing. Look how precisely and on target the physician works, and this by not touching tissues by his hands, manipulating only instruments. In the opinion of the leading French specialist, the Professor Maurice Broad, such operations address the striving of contemporary medicine to minimum interference in the human body. Mr. Broad noted that endoscopic surgery has all preconditions for development in our country, and not only preconditions. Thousands of such operations have already been performed in clinics of Moscow, St. Petersburg, and other cities. A broader implementation of state-of-the-art technologies is impeded by the shortage of expensive apparatus and instruments. How do you see the future of endoscopic surgery? I think that by the year 2000 in our country, 60% of all operations will be done laparoscopically. In the Scientific Center of Obstetrics, Gynecology and Prenatology, constantly seminars and symposiums are organized. Russian specialists and physicians from the CIS countries are updated in their methods. Abroad. On Sunday in Sweden, a general national referendum was held on the country entering the European Council. From the site of occurrence, our Northern European correspondent, Dmitry Kiselov. Sweden is undergoing a truly historical moment. At night on the eve of elections regarding the entrance into a unified Europe, here on one of the main streets of Stockholm, opponents and supporters of this joining a unified Europe gathered. In this case, on my right, you can see people with sparklers. They are for Europe, and on my left, a column with torches. They are against Europe. No one beats anyone else. It's almost merry and almost theatrical, with even some irony. Swedes demonstrate the differences in their positions. During the day, approximately on this site, the Prime Minister Ingvar Carlsson, who'd become hoarse from answering questions publicly, tried to dispel the last doubts. On Sunday, the people went to the polls. Activity at voting in Sweden's history was astounding. 82% of the eligible voters turned out. For comparison, in the referendum of 1922 to abolish the dry law, only 55% participated. Now, the problems, however, are far more severe. In unified Europe, Sweden will have to open up and emerge from its bear's den in the north. Membership in the European Union means free movement of goods and services, capital and labor, coordination, agriculture and fishing. Previously this year, on these conditions, were Austria and Finland. Sweden is number 3. After it, in the end of November, the referendum will be held in Norway. On Sunday night, after voting, the entire country sat in front of its television sets in order to learn their own decision. On Swedish television, journalists and politicians gathered who, live on the air, commented on the tallying of votes. And late at night, in the winners' camp, there was champagne, dances and songs. The Bandera Rosa at this moment, for some reason. The President of the United States, Bill Clinton, stated that the administration, as previously, supports the international embargo on weapons in Bosnia. Speaking at a press conference, he had admitted that changes in Washington's position toward the embargo generated criticism from the American allies, and he made great efforts in order to clarify the latest steps to the allies. The changes in America's position, according to him, regard only providing observation for this embargo. And the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Russia, Andrei Kozyrev, intends to find a common language with friends on the eve of the December Council of NATO and the summit of the CESC in Budapest. He has left for Paris. In the capital of Indonesia, Jakarta, a meeting was held between the chairman of the Chinese National Republic, Jiang Zemin, and the President of the United States, Clinton. During talks, the heads of both countries stated that because of the agreements reached by Beijing and Washington on several problems at a previous meeting in Seattle, the Chinese-American relations are now on the rails of normal development. The American president, expressing satisfaction with progress achieved in the two-sided relations, noted that during the last year they have become even closer. Specifically, Clinton indicated establishing contacts between the military departments of the two countries. At the meeting, great attention was directed to the Taiwan problem. Severe street clashes in the suburbs of Sansal in the east of Nepal ended with the hospitalization of 22 people. 4 of them were seriously injured. The reason for the clash was the murder committed yesterday of one of the activists of the Nepali Congress. The hijacking of the plane of the Algerian company Air Algérie ended with the release of all passengers and the terrorists being handed over to Spanish authorities. On board of the Fokker 27 were 34 passengers and 4 crew members. The terrorists, who called themselves peaceful Algerians, demanded the release of all political prisoners in Algeria and the restoration of democracy in the country. The object, which they claimed to be an explosive device, was merely an electric coffee grinder. From Hungary today, they report about a scandal with red pepper. Red pepper is the national symbol of Hungary. It has been grown here for many, many centuries. Its flavor is part of many national dishes of the Hungarian cuisine. Red pepper, or here they call it paprika, is an important component of Hungarian export as well. And who could think that this paprika would, figuratively speaking, overspice that export and even ruin it? Everything began with cases of poisoning because of ground paprika. Tens of people ended up in hospital. Evidently, this list has not finished yet. During the investigation, it became clear people were buying an imitation. On the black market from Romania, unripened ground paprika was brought in. It was colored with dye brought in from Ukraine and put on sale. But incidentally, that dye had a tincture of lead in it. Authorities banned the sale of paprika on the market and street kiosks, but it was learned that some major trade firms had also bought quantities of the toxic good, because the scam artists from 3 countries who united around this business managed to provide this good even with brand name labels. For now, the government has banned the trade of the red ground pepper altogether. One can only trade whole peppers. A pervasive investigation is underway. Damage to the state treasury is assessed at tens of millions of forints, and it's not known how much pepper was taken by tourists and the famous salami. A special commission asserts that major meat plants and canning factories didn't buy the poisoned paprika, but doubts remain among the people. The authority of the country in producing this age-old Hungarian product, mildly speaking, has been shaken. The issue was even discussed in Parliament. For now, however, the poisoned paprika by the ton is being burned in special ovens. Under investigation are 18 people. Rumor has it that there will be more. In his 65th year of life, the prominent social activist and publicist Yuri Verchenko has died. Yuri Verchenko worked in the editorial department of the newspaper Moskovsky Komsomolets, was a Komsomol leader, and headed the publication The Young Guard. He was the secretary of the Union of Writers of the USSR. Verchenko is known as a talented critic, a literary writer, and writer of bright publicistic articles. In the museum and church Trinity in Nikitniki, images of the imagination of Italy, played and narrated by Sergei Steidler. The 32-year-old musician is probably one of the few in the world performing the repertoire of the great Paganini. His dream is to play the violin of the maestro himself at a concert in the Petersburg Hermitage. Steidler is a laureate of many international competitions. He's known by all violin lovers of the world. However, now, Sergei feels his goal is to do everything so that the music of the best masters would be heard not only abroad, but in Russia as well, so that young talents can afford to think more about the eternal than about their daily bread. Therefore, Sergei Steidler is in a rather unusual role for himself. He's become president of a new benevolent fund, the Key S. How does one decipher that name? Is it the treble clef that's implied, or the key which will help to open for Russians the treasures of world culture? One may make presumptions, but it's interesting that those who attended this evening are activists of art and politics, seems not only like violin music, but share the views of the virtuoso. The Russian State Academic Chamber Vivaldi Orchestra celebrated its first anniversary 5 years since the day of its founding, and this collective was first among our contemporary chamber orchestras just recently to receive the title of academic. The birthday was celebrated in the Bolshoi Hall of the Conservatory. Flowers, excitement, and all tickets sold out. Everything as it should be. However, just recently, this orchestra, created by Svetlana Bezrodnaya, was literally perishing. The financial collapse meant artistic death as well. However, people were found who supported the feeble women. In the orchestra, there are only representatives of the fairer gender. This is the rebirth of that patronage force which Russia was famous for. That is, these are people who come and take art by the hand and don't allow it to disappear. And what is unique is that they don't demand anything in recompense. Yes, there are no conditions apart from one, more precisely two. First of all, to grow and become perfected in the arts and not to leave the homeland for long and serve Russia. Both conditions are fulfilled by the orchestra. Apart from their own artistic endeavors, they find time for benevolent concerts, mostly for children, and to organize such marvelous festivals, which we all remember in honor of Vladimir Vasilyev, in honor of Igor Moiseev. The artistic association of the House of Vivaldi, created on the basis of an orchestra, one must hope has become a home, a kind, warm, cozy home for domestic talents and for us, those who come to the theater and concert halls in order to rejoice at their sight. And now, during these very moments in the Mossovет Theater, a huge gala concert is underway, a memorial concert to the memory of the leading director, Yuri Alexandrovich Savatsky, who today would have turned 100 years old. In honor of the master, in his memory, what a painful remorse at his absence in the theater today, in his theater, to which he gave more than 40 years, who managed, as no one else, to preserve its dignity even in the most difficult years. And all these viewers and all these artistic people of several generations, united by the debt of respect and gratitude to the great artist, came today to his theater. This is occurring without Yuri Alexandrovich, but evidently his spirit is present here somehow. I have lived in Moscow for 26 years thanks to the will and desire of Yuri Alexandrovich Savatsky. Himself a brilliant actor, as his roles the first Kalaf, the unfading Turandot, the marvelous Chatsky. He created his own theater, the theater of unanimous thinkers, of students, and later top-class actors Matvinov, Maretskaya, Plat, Abdulov. And now the new generation, how they lack those actors, and his lessons, his famous conversations, his inseparable dedication to theater. Belonging to Russian intelligentsia and who endured an enormous moral school, he was the representative of the highest theatrical culture, which he received from his teachers, Stanislavski and Vakhtangov. His directorial art combined the bright theatricality, psychological truth, the experience of Russian music, art, poetry. Not by coincidence, Marina Tsvetaeva dedicated an entire cycle of her poems to him. All this was manifested in his inspired plays, symphonies, from the Lermontov Masquerade to the summit of his directorial career, Dostoevsky's Petersburg Dreams. Today, Yuri Alexandrovich Savatsky is remembered, the talented director, and the astonishing, wonderful man. And also, the memory of him is marvelous. And this probably is all the basic information of the day, except for, of course, the sports events. The sports commentator is already in the studio. In a moment, sports, I say goodbye to you and wish you all the best. Good evening. Today in the Luzhniki Stadium, the team of the Russian hockey stars, in a match with the Capital Army team, concluded its benevolent tournament through the cities of Russia. The site of a match at times can be changed, apparently. Certain confusion resulting over the arenas of the Army in Luzhniki ended in the first time during the tournament, stands were not filled to capacity. However, the game was held in Luzhniki, and in the second minute, Pavel Bure opened the score. The Army team was not set back by such a beginning. In the middle of the first period, Samsonov scored a response goal. And furthermore, the game was very stubborn. The Legionnaires took the lead 2-1, later 3-1. Simak and Mogilny stood out. Their experience and mastery were undoubted, and for the Legionnaires, the most results yielded by the Troika, Mogilny, Bure, Fedorov, who have 4 goals on its score. By the end of the second period, the Stars led 6-1, and in the third period, the Army awoke suddenly, and 4 goals entered the net of Ryabchik. And now on your screens, the last seconds of the match. A 30-second break was taken by the Stars team. And to the end of the match, counted seconds remain. And so the Army begins an attack on the net of the Stars. How this interesting game will end, you will learn in literally a few seconds. And so the final whistle, and the Stars beat the other team 6-5. After the match, the president of Russia, Boris Yeltsin, congratulated the hockey players. And other sports events. The basketball players of the Russian team, after their decisive victory over the Finnish team in the qualifying round of the European Championships in Berlin, beat the Bosnia-Herzegovina team 94-86. In our group, the Finns have beat the Ukrainian team 97-92 and gained 9 points, just as the Russian team did. Sad news from America. Wilma Rudolph has died, the queen of the Roman Olympics of 1960, who at the age of 19 won 3 gold medals there in the 100 and 200-meter dashes and in the relay 4x100 meters. Rudolph, to this day, was considered to be one of the fastest in the sport and most charming athlete in the history of track and field. Chess, the world champion Garry Kasparov, with a score of 2-0, beat the Bosnian Petar Nikolic in the finals, which were held in Paris at the International Fast Chess Tournament. And so, as a result of the competitions under the aegis of the Professional Chess Association, Kasparov has shared first place with another Russian player, Vladimir Kramnik. Good evening. Information from the Oceanic Meteorological Center of Russia. Over the north of Scandinavia, cyclones are shifting quickly. Their activity is reminiscent of the effect of giant fans, which from time to time, over the northern latitudes, send warm Atlantic air. And so, tomorrow, on the Kola Peninsula, Karelia, in the west of the Arkhangelsk district, and on the Republic of Komi, under the influence of a cyclone with a center over the Norway Sea, warm, humid Atlantic air will begin to seep in. Therefore, cloudiness will increase. Brief precipitation is expected. Day temperatures -2 to +3. In the Baltic countries and in Belarus, in the northwest and central regions, in the zone of an atmospheric front, it will be cloudy, rainy, with wet snow during the day. Baltic countries and Belarus, +3 to +7 degrees. In the northwest and central regions, freezing rain, snow accumulation on electrical lines, strong gusty winds, temperatures from 0 to -5. In the eastern areas of the Nenetsk Autonomous District, the Republic of Komi, the Volgovansk area, partly cloudy skies with light snows, -8 to 13 degrees. The central Volga and the central Chernozem area will be under the influence of an anticyclone, which is departing toward the east. Expected is clear and dry weather during the day, -2 to 7 degrees. On the lower Volga, the northern Caucasus area, in the Stavropol, Krasnodar, Rim areas, and also in the lower Don, in the zone of a lethargic atmospheric front, the inclement weather will remain with rains, wet snows, and strong gusty winds. Also possible icing of electrical wires. In the north of Ukraine, cloudy with isolated rains during the day around 0. In the south of Ukraine and in Moldova, mostly clear skies without precipitation, temperatures +3 to 8 degrees. Beyond the Caucasus, the day will be cloudy and rainy during the day, +10 to 15 degrees. In St. Petersburg, cloudy skies with intermittent precipitation at night, -3 to -5 during the day, 0 +2. In Moscow, the weather will be defined by an atmospheric front from the west. Expected is increased cloudiness, rain, and wet snow with icy roads at night, -4 to 6 degrees, through the district as low as -8 during the day, around 0. The Russian Food Bank hopes that your morning will be pleasant. I bid you farewell. Goodbye.